Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. This is Lori Smith on Blog Talk Radio. It is Wednesday morning, 6 o'clock here in the morning, Calgary, Alberta, and June the 2nd. I'm happy to be here. This is One Child Abuse Survivor to Another, and we're on for 30 minutes. It's a live internet streaming radio broadcast from blogtalkradio.com, and the chat room is open if anybody wants to go sit in there, if they're up and awake at this time. I'm just having some coffee, waking up, and happy to be here. I cut back on a couple of my shows. I actually dropped the Tuesday and the Thursday morning show just to give me some time to do some other things that I need to take care of, and also to research and whatnot, because I also do shows for Dreamcatchers Talk Radio here on Blog Talk Radio, and 3 nights a week. So it sort of added shows, you know, and that I just really felt I needed some time to be able to do my normal daily activities as well as take a break, you know. So I'm just skipping a couple of mornings, Tuesdays and Thursday mornings, but I'll be on Monday, Wednesday, Friday mornings here with One Child Abuse Survivor to Another, same time, 6 a.m. And so I wanted to, you know, it's so important, I know, as a survivor of child abuse, and it's hard to cope. And I know 3 years ago, you know, the difference between now and 3 years ago is very noticeable to me. I don't know if anybody else would notice it, because I don't think that very many people were paying attention to what was going on in my heart, you know what I mean, and what was going on with me. And so, you know, but I certainly noticed the difference, and I have really learned how to cope quite well, and, you know, I'm learning as I go along, right? And so it's just so important that we find help and get help, you know, and keep reaching out. And that's why I'm doing this show, you know, just to be one more voice to say, you know, I really hope everybody will reach out and get some help and not suffer in silence. And because child abuse, you know, it's such a huge problem. There's such a huge stigma surrounding it. You know, people oftentimes, if they're abused, don't want to tell anybody, and a lot of times it's because the abuser is still living, and there's possibility of repercussions and more abuse, right? So there's always a problem with that. And then also, a lot of times people are just so ashamed of what happened to them that they can't come forward, and they don't want to talk about it. And, you know, many times people who grew up in abusive homes just don't want to admit that they had an abusive home. And, you know, it is a little bit somewhat embarrassing, right, that people would know that, you know, you've come from this home that was dysfunctional and abusive, and, you know, and people kind of have a tendency sometimes to think, well, you know, there must be something wrong with you then because you were abused, right? So that's why I'm doing this show, to say that, you know, we have to feel differently about ourselves as survivors of child abuse, right? We are no lesser of a person because we were abused as children. And, you know, just because a person's abused as a child does not mean they cannot go on to have a healthy life, you know, the best life that they can have, and I truly believe this, and the best life possible, right? But we have to reach out, and we really have to make that initiative. We have to take that first step to reach out and get some help. And, you know, it doesn't mean that you might not want to go public or talk about your story to public people, and that's no problem, because everyone has to do what they feel comfortable doing. And I wanted to go public with my story because I want to do public speaking regarding child abuse issues, prevention of child abuse, and human rights abuses, right? And that's what I plan on doing for the rest of my life, is public advocacy. And I thought, you know, if I'm going to do that, I have to feel comfortable with my own past. And in order to be comfortable with my own past, I'm going to have to learn how to cope with it, to deal with it, to, you know, to accept that and acknowledge that it happened. Whether anybody else wants to acknowledge it doesn't matter to me. There's reports, old reports from CPS, and, you know, it doesn't matter. There's people in my life that knew what was going on, and so that's fine. But the whole issue is I had to be okay with it, and so that's the whole thing. It did cause me to have to deal with it, and in doing so, I've really kind of done a lot of healing. And so just by taking a look at it. So that's why I'm doing this show, you know. So I'm not a professional. I don't hold any professional counseling certificates or anything like that. And, you know, I'm just a person who pays to do this show because I really feel that child abuse is not talked about enough. And adult survivors, you know, there's so many of us out there. It's really quite sad. There's like 60 million, that's the, you know, one of the statistics out there, 60 million survivors, adult survivors out there in the United States alone. So that doesn't include Canada or the world. So 60 million just in the United States adult survivors of child sexual abuse. So that doesn't even that doesn't even encompass physical abuse, verbal abuse, emotional abuse, psychological abuse, right? So that's the whole issue. There's too many people being abused. There's too many children right now who are being abused, and that's why I just think, we all need to become comfortable talking about this subject so that we can change it, and so that we can find ways to prevent it from happening. So that's why I'm doing these shows, and just to be one more voice out there, right? And so, if you're a person under the age of 18, I ask that you have an adult listen to the show with you, because I fight for child rights, and I'm standing up to save children's lives. And I think that, with the way that the world is right now, especially today, in today's society, in today's world, it's a huge issue with online safety for children. There are millions of child online sexual predators out there, trying to get a hold of kids online at any given time. But that's from the FBI's website. So you have to really be very careful what you're doing online. So if you're a young person under the age of 18, I ask that you have someone listen to the show with you, just to make sure that it's okay that you listen to it, and that then they can help you if you have questions and you're just not sure what we're talking about. Abuse is not talked about very often, and the surrounding issues surrounding child abuse and adult survivor issues. So that's why I ask young people to have someone listen to the show with them, so that they can help them if they have questions, or they just feel like something is just, they've never heard of it, or it could be very kind of a scary thing. Abuse is a very sensitive topic, and that's why I ask people to listen at their own discretion. I'm talking today about coping lists from Child Abuse Monument. And that's Michael C. Irving. He's the founder and creator of the Child Abuse Monument here in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. And you can find his website at www.irvingstudios.com and /child_abuse_survivor_monument. You can also find it just by typing in Child Abuse Monument. It'll come up, and it'll be his website there, and it's a great website. That monument was built for really to in honor and in memory of child abuse victims and survivors, and it was created by him, but a whole bunch of survivors of child abuse got to actually be part of it and put their handprint on there, and their poetry and different things like that. It's really worth checking out, and I hope everybody will take a look at it online. And if you're in the Toronto area, you could stop in and actually check it out. I've never seen it in person, but I've seen it online, and it's just awesome. So that's we're going to talk about coping and how adult survivors of child abuse and how hard it is to cope. There is lots of good coping information out there, and so I've actually already been over this, but it's probably in December or something, or January, or maybe even February. So that's the whole thing. And my archives, there's there's almost 250 shows, so you'd have to go back and really look through them. So I thought, well, we'll just go over this again, and then I'm going to try to go back and relabel all my shows so that people will know exactly what it was and the information I used, because I keep all my references and what I'm talking about, right? So that's the thing. If this topic might bother you, then you need to turn the show off. You would not be hurting my feelings at all. We have to be responsible for what we listen to, and we really have to know what's going to be okay for us to listen to. So if the topic is something that might trigger you, then you just need to turn the show off, and it would not bother me at all. Listen at your own discretion and make that good decision for yourself, right? So we'll get right on to this. We have about 20 minutes left, and this is such a good article, such good information, and I really like this website. I went around, I've actually been on that website quite a bit over the past, I'd say, 8 months, maybe 9 months now, just looking through to see what's there. There's really some great information, and Michael C. Irving is a survivor himself. He's also a psychotherapist and a sculptor. And so he knows all about child abuse. He's a survivor, and he's also a psychotherapist. And so I really like his website, and I like what he's doing. He's a survivor who's out there trying to help people, and he's really making a difference in this world to stop child abuse and to help survivors of child abuse. And so I hope everyone will go and check out that website at http //www.irvingstudios.com. Irving, just like IRVING, studios.com. That's his website, and that's where you can find the Child Abuse Monument information. So we'll just look at this coping list. In there, you can see on his website, there's lots of coping lists and stuff that he has there. And I went through them all just to sort of check and see what it was all about. And there was one section that says create and use personalized coping lists for adult survivors, right? And this is just such good information. I really benefited from it just by reading it. And it really helped me to see that there are ways to cope. We don't have to allow our, we don't have to fall into a pit of just sadness all the time. And if you are doing that, then you do need to reach out and get some help, right? Because that's a sign of depression, or that you're just not coping well. And if you just can't cope, then you do need to get help. And that's my biggest thing. That's why I'm really pushing this. I know now that what to do if I sink down into a sort of a pit of despair, right? I can try to pull myself out and talk to people and get some help. I joined a couple of online group support for adult survivors. This must have been about 9 months ago. And that was very helpful to be able to talk to other survivors who have survived child abuse. And it was very helpful because they are healing too, and they're walking along in their journey. And they generally want you to heal as well, because that's what they're doing. They're trying to heal themselves. So it's a great way to talk to people if you can't afford therapy. They have resources and links, and there's usually somebody there that it can help, right? And it's just online, so a lot of people use anonymous names. And so if you don't want to use your real name, you can do that. Generally, when you register, you have to use your real name, and because you're registering for the site, but it's kept private, and only the actual person who actually founded and created the website actually has that information. Nobody else does. So it's great. You can go on anonymously if you don't feel like you don't want people to know who you are, and you can get some help and talk to people, right? It's so important. And that's the whole issue, right? We're all on this healing journey, right? And we really have to reach out and get help. It's no good to sit around and suffer in silence, which is what I did. And really, I had told a few people in my lifetime, and but I was still suffering in silence. I wasn't reaching out, trying to get help. I wasn't really even looking into it, and just felt very much alone. And that I knew there was other survivors because I've met many, and I actually grew up with quite a few. But I just felt like, wow, who can I even talk to? Generally, people that I would talk to about it, if they would ask me about my childhood, usually it scared them off, or they just felt that I was just too wounded, or they just couldn't handle hearing that kind of information. And some were actually survivors themselves, and they still couldn't handle it. They were just like, no, I can't deal with this. You need to talk to somebody else about this stuff, you know what I mean? So that's the whole issue, right? It's not easy to find people and friends who stick by you as a survivor of child abuse. This website's good for people who are supporting child abuse survivors as well, like friends of child abuse survivors, people who are walking with you in your journey. It's a great website for everybody. I wish everybody would take a look at it. So create and use personalized coping lists. That's what I want to talk about here from that website. It says survivors need a list of normal life activities and self-care. And during development, the numbing response to the abuse often meant that though you were physically there, you missed out on the learning skills that other children were experiencing. In addition, neglect is often associated with environments where abuse occurs, and a child who is neglected misses out on learning roles and modeling around normal activities. In shutting down against the trauma and pain, the victim of abuse learns to ignore their body and other needs. It becomes easy to neglect self-care, needs, and wants. Lists can be quite valuable for reference, particularly when you are under stress or when you anticipate stressful circumstances arising. And it says if you reach a point of crisis, they are a must. These lists, right? If you get to a point of crisis, we really need to know what to do. The more difficult a time you are having, the harder it is to remember the things that help you to manage the stress. And in effect, the greater your need is, the less you are able to provide for and look after yourself. So turning to a list that you made when feeling good is a way of using your grounded mind to help you when you are having a difficult time. So if we make these lists ahead of time, and we create these coping lists for ourselves ahead of time, our own personalized coping lists, then we can, when we're facing something that's just brought us so down, whether it's flashbacks or whatever it is, it's causing us to feel so bad, we can go back to those coping lists that we made when we were feeling good, and use them as a resource, and to help us to learn to get through it. See, so that's just the whole thing. You want to make these coping lists when you're actually feeling pretty good, and that way, when we're not feeling good, we can pull these up, right? And we'll have something to go by. And he's got some really awesome stuff there, all kinds of good coping lists. So we'll go through those, and just take a look at them. And that's the whole thing. If you experience neglect, and abuse as a child, quite often, we did not learn the skills necessary to learn how to cope and to learn how to take care of ourselves, self-care and self-nurturing, self-soothing. That's the whole issue with abuse, and that's why it's so hard for survivors to learn how to care for themselves, to learn how to live in this world, right? Because, if you grow up in a home where no one's coping well and there's no problem-solving skills and the parents aren't taking care of themselves, then it's very hard to learn, because children learn by seeing. Well, they learn by example, right? I mean, what the parents are doing is what the child is going to learn. They're going to see, and they're going to take those behaviors on. And it just cannot be helped, right? Because children they're little sponges, and they pick up what's going on around them, right? So if there was a lot of abuse and a lot of neglect, then of course the child is going to not have a healthy, start to life. And this is just the whole issue, and that's what's wrong. And adult survivors really have to go back and figure out what areas, that we have in our lives that we need work in, you know what I mean? And I know I've recognized quite a few. And I don't know if I could ever recognize them all. It would probably take a therapist or a counselor or somebody to show me what they think I'm actually doing sometimes in my life, But I know that I've recognized quite a few, just as because, if I'm having a hard time, I tend to not take care of things, and I always pay my bills and stuff like that, but I quite often won't clean, or, I won't do things that, I should do just because I need to keep a routine, right? Because keeping a routine is a very good way to stay focused, right, and not let yourself get too down and just fall into like a pit of depression, right? But my mother was very depressed, and she was a very depressed person. I believe she was diagnosed manic depressive, and so were some of my brothers, and or at least one of my brothers that I know of, the one who committed suicide. And my dad was borderline schizophrenic and also probably suffered from some sort of depression. So, when you have two parents who are not coping and just cannot pull it together, in any situation, whether it's, just a family argument or some emergency situation comes up in the family where there's a need for finances or something, then the whole thing would go absolutely out of control, because my two parents just could not cope and just did not know how to rely on each other and the family to get them through. So they could not agree on anything and never came together as a couple. And so the children saw this, right? So we did not come together as a family. We all stayed very much separate. We all loved each other, but we were not trying to, pull each other along and help each other out, because our parents weren't doing that. So we didn't do that either, and we all sort of went our own separate ways. Even though we were living in the home, we were not together as a family, So we all coped differently with stuff, and none of us coped all that well. And there was two siblings that actually got out of the home. They were the oldest siblings, and they got out when they were young, 16 and 18 years old. They were gone. Right? And the rest of us were just left there in this mess, too young to leave, and really, because we were the younger ones, had a lot more problems dealing with this whole stuff, and even today the older siblings were always kind of kept themselves separate from the rest of the family. They just did not want to have to deal with all that. They wanted to have a good life, and they didn't want to acknowledge the abuse. They just wanted to go on and do their thing, right? The rest of us were all left in in this chaotic, horrible, abusive environment, to fend for ourselves. So it did cause some family stress and some friction just because of that, you know what I mean? And it's very, very hard when this sort of thing happens. It's unfortunate that my parents didn't get help, and that's my big thing, is like just to encourage people to get help, and especially if you have children, so that you don't bring up your children in that type of form of fashion. Children, it's hard, life is hard enough without growing up in an abusive home or surviving, living in a domestic violence situation or whatever it is, life is hard enough without adding that to it. And so that's the whole issue, right? If we have children, we really need to make sure that we are treating them with respect and dignity, and that if we are having a hard time coping, that we will go and get some help, and not allow ourselves to treat our children badly and to treat ourselves badly and to treat, others badly, because what it does is it sets up your children to have a horrible life. And if you're a survivor of child abuse, then you would know this, right? It's very, very hard to get over. It's extremely hard to deal with, and it's sad, is what it is. That people there's so many adult survivors out there who have to struggle just to do the daily normal activities, and so that's why these coping lists are so important. It says write down even the obvious. It says some things on your coping list may seem obvious when all is going well, but the obvious is not always easily available when you are facing despair or flashbacks, and the mind numbs and fogs out as a means of getting through overwhelming feelings. It says when you are in a triggered state, it may not occur to you to go for a brisk walk or to ask yourself if you have eaten. If you turn to a list, something is likely to stand out and you can benefit from doing that activity. It says make your list over a period of time rather than all at once, and work on the list at different times of the day when you are in different moods. Your perceptions, creativity, and problem-solving activities change dramatically while feeling good, bad, angry, tired, or empowered. And the various insights from each of these moods have their own unique strengths. As stated before, write down the obvious along with the other less obvious strategies for coping. So this is so interesting, I really do. It says vary between the novel and the familiar. It says when using a stress reduction and coping technique, occasionally vary what you do. The technique you use every time to relax will eventually grow stale and may lose much of the original effect. Conversely, use some of your tried and true responses because as they become habitual, they click on easily due to familiarity. So, he's saying just vary it, and keep it a little so it doesn't get stale and old and then it doesn't work anymore, right? And also the ones that really worked, keep those because you know that if that really works for you, then you know it probably, and you feel very good about it and comfortable with whatever it was that helps you to cope. You want to keep that as a tried and true, that it does work, and keep that just because you know that that's always going to work, right? So it's so important. It says 4 activity lists that are helpful for survivors are, they list off here, number 1. I'm just reading right from this webpage, and you can go there too. That's at www.irvingstudios.com. That's where you can find this information. 4 activity lists that are helpful for survivors are daily, weekly activities, which is take care of yourself and stay healthy. And that one I think I have to work on. What to do, number 2, what to do to create boundaries. That's another one. And number 3, what to do to relieve stress. So that's another coping list. And number 4, what to do with cope with crisis. So how to cope with crisis. So those are the 4 lists. Take care of yourself and stay healthy. That's number 1. Create boundaries is number 2. Relieve stress is number 3. And cope with crisis. That's number 4. And so we're supposed to create these coping lists for ourselves, right? And this way, if we're having a hard time, we can go and look at our coping lists and wait till we get into. I really hope that you will go check this out on the website. I'm going to go ahead and read through this again because it's very helpful for me too, right? It's not just helpful for everybody else. It's helpful for me. It's a good reminder for me of what we can do to help ourselves to feel better, right? And there is some really good information on here. It's such a good article, and I really hope everybody will go check it out. The 4 different coping lists we can make, tailor-made for ourselves, what works for us, right? And it says here, stability and well-being are greatly anchored by being surrounded by the ordinary, nurturing, and looking after oneself. It says when you are not overwhelmed by memories or stress, most of the requirements and concerns of self-care seem obvious and straightforward. But trauma has a way of blurring the ordinary as extraordinary surfaces and seems to take precedence, right? That, when trauma happens, right, it's hard to just do the normal things. And I grew up like that. We grew up in a very traumatic home. There was always some sort of trauma going on, and my parents were really most of the cause of it because they were unable to handle anything. And so just a normal shopping trip could turn into some sort of traumatic experience. And so, then my mother would spin off into a depression, and then my dad would be miserable, and then the kids would be miserable, right? So it's just, that's the whole issue, right? Just normal things would trigger my parents into having some sort of crisis, you know what I mean? And so, my mom would often retreat to her bed and stay there for 3 or 4 days, not talk to anybody, and I'd go to talk to her, but she wouldn't really acknowledge me, and she'd just be like, whatever, it was very, very difficult. My dad was having a hard time coping, and they were very abusive towards each other and the children, and physically, verbally, emotionally, mentally, psychologically, and spiritually as well. So the whole thing was really bad situation, and I felt my parents were both have their own they both had their own mental issues, right? So that's the whole issue, right? They should have gotten some help, and if they would have got some help, the family would have got some help. We would have got some help, see? And I really believe that would have changed the whole entire family scenario, and probably some of my siblings would still be here today, right? Because one of my brothers committed suicide at the age of 33, and another brother died of a drug overdose at the age of 43. So, that's horrible. And another brother was murdered or killed, right? So, but when he was 19. But, there was at least two of my brothers that I think, really would have still been around for a long, long time had the family got some help. And we would have just learned how to cope as a family and come together as a family. Even in our dysfunction, we still loved each other. Even with all the abuse and the dysfunction, we still we just learned how to live in this dysfunction, right? In this mess of a life. And because we really all wanted the best for each other, but when you have two parents who have mental problems and are also very abusive, and were abused as children, you got a mess. You got one big mess, right? So that's what we grew up in, and that's what I've been working my whole life to just stay alive, really, and to try to want to stay alive and to want to be a part of this world and feel like I actually do belong here, and that I can have a good life, right? And that's where I was 3 years ago, looking in the mirror saying I do count, I do matter, and I did not deserve to be treated that way as a child, and no one does. And so, how am I going to deal with this? How am I going to learn to love myself and learn to love this life and learn to be able to cope with normal things that come up in life, right? Because life is stressful. And so anytime something stressful happens, adult survivors especially have a hard time coping with it, because even normal people who have not experienced child abuse, I wouldn't say normal, but just people who have not experienced child abuse, they have a hard time coping. So that's the whole issue. You can imagine it just multiplies at times, however many times, when someone's suffered in an abusive home, especially for many, many years, and it just goes on and on and on, and they never get any help. It's very hard to learn how to cope. Quite often people turn to drugs, they turn to crime, they just don't do well, right? And so that's why it's very important for us to learn how to cope, and even with normal activities and things that could come up, job loss, a death in the family, anything like that, financial troubles, health issues, right? All of a sudden there's physical health issues. How do you cope? And if we were not taught to cope well and no problem-solving skills, and and as an abuse survivor, child abuse survivor, we quite often have lower self-esteem and lack of confidence and a lack of self-worth, And so that's the whole issue. Then it's very hard to deal with stuff that even most people would find difficult. Survivors of child abuse almost find impossible. And so, that's the whole issue, right? It is very possible. I hope that everyone will reach out and get some help. Check out these coping lists here on this website. Start doing some of these activities. I know that by journaling, it really helped me out. I wrote my story out as a blog, and it was like a journal. I would just write every night, and I would recall the memories and bring them back, and I would write it down. And I never really had to do much work on a second, edit or anything like that. It just flowed out from me, and I left it as it was. And I wanted people to know the truth, because I couldn't stand having that inside of me any longer, keeping that bottled up, right? You can find my book. It's on Lulu.com. It's called A Life of Death, The Redemption, and it's Lulu.com. It's published by Shear and Potter Books, and all the proceeds are going to Dreamcatchers for Abused Children to stop child abuse. I am so happy about that. I don't want the money from that book. I want that book to go, I want the proceeds to go to stop child abuse. So that's why I hope everyone will pick up a copy. And if you need to find it, it's on my website at Blog Talk Radio, and you can also find it at Lulu.com, A Life of Death, The Redemption. And it's $12.95, and if anybody wants a copy, all the money is going to Dreamcatchers for Abused Children. So I hope that you will grab a copy. And it's my personal story. It's my life, And I hope that it helps people to realize just that there is hope and that they do need to hang on. I wish my brothers could have had a copy of it, really, because they would probably still be alive today if they did. It's really written for my brothers, Howard and Robert, because in their memory, because they went to their graves in silence and shame, and people just looked so down on them as they were just losers, right? That's what people thought, they were just losers. But nobody saw what they went through as children, but I did, and I remember. So I'm like the only one in the family that's willing to accept that and to be their voice, right? So that's why I'm so happy to be able to do that, and I hope that everybody will check that book out. So there's about 10 seconds. I'll be back on tonight with Elizabeth Roberts Brawley on Dreamcatchers Talk Radio here at www.blogtalkradio.com/Dreamcatchers at 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And then I'll be back on my own show, Child Abuse Prevention, Human Rights Abuse Prevention is Up to Us, and that's right after that show at 9:30 Mountain Standard Time or 11:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and for half an hour. So take care of yourselves, everybody. Have a really great day, and I thank you so much for tuning in. Just make sure you reach out and get some help, and don't suffer in silence. That's just sad. Have a really good day, okay? And if you need anything, get a hold of me on Blog Talk Radio or on Facebook. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.